And I have the pleasure to introduce Ellen Reed, our Director of Humanities, who's going to walk you through some of the work that we're doing here in Fairport. Again, one of our big rocks, the curriculum components of it.
Thanks, Brett. And thank you, Gabrielle and Shane, for that presentation. I'm going to take some time and just go through some of the work that we have been doing. And I think what's key is when we, and Brett mentioned this, we're talking about work that we've been doing over a long period of time in terms of curriculum and standards work. I'm going to focus on the humanities aspect of this work, which is primarily English language arts and social studies. But I think that it's critical to think in the terms of standards-based and content-rich, because the content is the vehicle. You know, the content is how we actually move standards forward. And so I think some of what Shane and Gabrielle shared is exactly that. You know, it's that content that then gets to our standards. So I'll start with, and actually, it's interesting, we already saw through the presentation, the large overarching standards that we connect with through this work are the culturally responsive and sustaining education framework, which Shane and Gabrielle showed in those trees. And this is something, again, as New York State educators, as a district, we're obligated to use these standards as part of our curricular work. And I think as you see in, you know, the 4 areas that are most important in this work, the keys, the welcoming and affirming environment, the high expectations and rigorous instruction, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, the inclusive curriculum and assessment and ongoing professional learning and support. These are key, and truthfully, these ideas are overarching in all of our curricular areas, not just the humanities. You know, this is a framework that's critically important in all of our curricular areas. I'm here to focus on the humanities pieces. So I also want to highlight, when you take a look at key points that come from our humanities ELA curriculum, and if you take a look at just some of the key areas, remember, just pieces of the larger context of English language arts, these are standards that are critical for school districts. We are obligated to actually work through and actually have culturally responsive texts, and texts that should reflect global and diverse variety of authors and time periods and genres. So the work that we've been doing is connected to these standards. And so I share first some of the work that we've been doing in English language arts. And I start actually with, for me, one of the most important concepts is that the most culturally responsive thing that we can do as a school district is to make sure that students can actually engage in high expectations and rigorous instruction. The most important thing we can do is to make sure that our students can read and write and be critical thinkers. And so beyond the text, beyond picking, you know, the particular unit or a particular book to use, it is critically important for us as a school district to make sure that we have high expectations connected to making sure that students can read and write. I focus here on our work at the primary level, just because I think it is one of the most important things that we can do. And so we have been working over the past few years to make sure that at the primary level, that we are actually engaging in the science of reading work that has become very important as really across, not just New York State, but across the country. And to make sure that our teachers are trained and that students are really getting that foundational work that they need in order to be able to be solid readers and writers. We're dabbling a little bit into the writing revolution as well. I put that up there as a reference. We're just getting into some of this work, but I can't emphasize enough that I think this is, for me, some of the most important work that we're doing to really get us on that road. We want to make sure that as students grow and as students, as Brett mentioned in the beginning when we're talking about our district initiatives or our district goals, we want the students to end up when they graduate as a student who can critically think and who can engage in this kind of work. And it starts here. It starts really at the most primary level. In addition to that, of course, we want to talk about the content. So when we take a look at again, one of the pieces of the work that we've just started this summer was to create a collection of read-alouds at the elementary level, K-5, that have lessons and class discussion prompts that go with them. Each grade level has 3 texts that they are going to engage in throughout the school year. And they run the gamut of identity, race discussions, and also the idea of actually being activists. Some of what I think, again, Shane and Gabrielle were talking about were very much a part of this work as well. I think what's critically important here is to realize all developmentally appropriate books that are, of course, connected to what's important at each grade level, and also that come with support for teachers so that they can engage in these discussions with their students. In addition, at the 6 through 8 level in ELA, we've just started to add to our canon. If you think back to the slide that I shared earlier, connected to ELA, we are looking at adding to our culturally responsive texts, in addition to, of course, really analyzing the text that we already have. And so that's a work in progress. We're really just starting that work. And so as we look through 6 through 8, there's our collections of books that we're doing at each level. And again, at the high school level as well, again, work that we've really just started to kind of scratch the surface of. Again, all standards-based, all with the connection to what we are expected to do as a district across that standards work. In addition, social studies is a part of the humanities, of course. And so this is very connected to the presentation that we just saw. And Shane and Gabrielle referenced the K-12 social studies framework. And I think, again, what's key, and I've just highlighted some of the most important things, when you're looking across the themes at a glance, the things that as a district we are required to actually include in our curriculum work, you're looking at interaction of cultures, you're looking at making sure that there are global connections and exchanges, civic ideals and practices. So all of the curriculum work that we're doing is connected to this framework. And so we've already talked through the grade 4 curriculum. We are connecting, and Shane has done a fantastic job coming and working with our 4th grade teachers and really being supportive with them and walking through the curriculum. I think it's important to realize that Shane's presentation, when he does to an adult, and he did a great job tonight making sure that it was clear, it doesn't look exactly that way in a 4th grade classroom. The concepts are there, but everything is connected to New York State standards, the culturally responsive standards, and is done in a way that actually requires students to do some really quality, important critical thinking. In addition to that, we also mentioned, so I think Shane and Gabrielle mentioned that there are projects that are happening through Pat Stone at 4th and then other grade levels. We are focusing with Shane on that 4th grade curriculum. And then, as Brett mentioned, we are also connected to the University of Rochester Center for Urban Education Success. So we are collaborating with that group to work on curriculum project at the 8th, 11th, and 12th grade level. The reason those are the grade levels, so if you're wondering, well, why not other grade levels? These are the grade levels that study New York or U.S. history, and so it makes sense that these are the places where we actually do this work. And so this is a work in progress. We are continuing to collaborate with this group and should be working on actually doing some of the work in our classrooms in the spring. The teachers are still working through this. And so as Shane had mentioned, both projects have teachers from across different school districts who are collaborating together and using those standards to actually create this work that will be used in our classroom. And I think one of the most important things, I'm gonna throw this over to Kelly for a moment, because I think all of this curriculum work is wonderful, but I think it's critical that any of this work can only be done in classrooms where we have really created affirming environments and relationships with students. And so Kelly's going to talk a little bit about what that looks like for us as a district and some of the professional development pieces as well.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm just going to touch briefly on the last two parts. Ellen reviewed, if you're looking at that New York State Culturally Responsive and Sustaining Education Framework, Ellen talked a lot about the rigorous instruction as well as the culturally responsive texts. So I'm going to just touch on the last two just to balance out how we're implementing both the New York State Culturally Responsive Sustaining Framework as well as the other standards. Welcoming and affirming environments. We work closely with partners of restorative initiatives, also known as PERI in our community, and we're doing wide-scale training on restorative practices and community circles. And the whole design of this is that we must get to know our students well and build relationships with them. And this is done through, again, restorative practices is a methodology for this. community building circles, a way to structure and support meaningful conversations, a way to repair harm while maintaining relationships, and they're inclusive and equitable by nature. So again, this is an important part of this work is to, intentionally create those welcoming and affirming environments. And just to touch on the last part, and this has been talked about through the entire conversation, is that to support the implementation of these New York State standards, both in areas like English language arts, social studies, and with the responsive framework, we need to support teachers in this work. We have done work on our Superintendent's Day, as well as work during faculty meetings on how to use materials and be culturally responsive. There's been ongoing work throughout with administrators and Board of Education, summer curriculum writing and training in the new units, as Ellen mentioned, working directly with Shane to train our teachers, ongoing coaching and classroom support, as well as a whole array of professional learning sessions, book studies. We have a program called SEED for Seeking Educational Equity and Diversity, and again, continuation of the training and restorative practices. So again, all this is supported with an intentional work with teachers as we utilize these new materials and the culturally responsive sustaining framework.
That concludes our presentation for this evening. I'd like to thank all of our presentations once again. Shane Wiegand and Gabrielle Brannigan. We appreciate the insights that you shared and the history that lots of us don't know about. I was a social studies teacher, like I have said, and those are pieces that I wish I knew when I was in the classroom, because it would have definitely enhanced the level of dialogue and connections that we always try to create. To Ellen Reed and to Kelly Weishard, thank you so much for speaking to how this is relating in a curricular sense and from our professional development and our commitment to our work and imperative here in Fairport. Please stay engaged, be open to new learning, and continue to expect us to invite community members, staff, and students alike, and special presenters to foster conversation, deep dialogue, so we can continue to move forward, be better, foster critical thinking, and making sure that we do the very best for our students and greater community. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us here this evening on YouTube Live, and we look forward to visiting with you all in the very near future. Stay well.